All right, good evening and welcome everyone. My name is Brock Hoenes. I am the Regional Director for the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife's North Central Region. That's also known as Region 2. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight because we really value these opportunities to hear directly from the public that we serve and to talk about fish and wildlife conservation and management in our state. I really wish we could get to a point where we can meet in person again, but for now, the virtual world will have to serve our purposes. So I'm joined tonight by our Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife Director, Kelly Susewind, as well as our regional management team, who I'll introduce in just a moment. But first, thanks for being here, Kelly.
You bet, Brock. Thanks for having me. Glad to be out here. I want to say thanks to everybody who's joined us here tonight. We know folks are busy and we appreciate you taking some time out of your schedule to join us and hopefully get a few questions in. This is an effort we started a few years back. As Brock said, our preference is to do these in person, but that'll have to wait for now. We definitely have plans to do that when we can. So this is really your opportunity to get to know the folks who work in your region and ask questions directly to the staff from your region. I'm pretty excited we have the management team here tonight. So these are our lead folks for fish, wildlife, habitat enforcement, lands. These are the local folks making decisions for your local resources. And so I think it's a great opportunity for you all to get to meet them. And hopefully this format works out for you. So with that, I do want to save a bunch of time. The Q&A is always probably the most informative part of the night.
Thanks, Kelly, and thanks again for being with us tonight. So first, I want to say that I sit in front of you tonight, a humbled human being, and would like to get us started off by addressing the elephant that's somewhat joined us in this virtual room. As many of you know, I made headlines last week for committing and self-reporting a hunting violation. Although some of the details associated with that incident have already been reported in the media, I simply can't speak to any of the specifics tonight because of the ongoing judicial process. It's a regrettable and embarrassing mistake. I wish I could take it back, but I can't. So I simply have to own up to that mistake and accept the consequences that come with it. What I can say tonight is there's no way for me to spin this or make an excuse. I'm in this situation because I didn't take the 30 seconds that would have taken me to double check in the hunting pamphlet what I thought to be true in my head. As such, I do hope that this can serve as a learning experience for other hunters, and that no matter how long you've been going on a hunt or how confident you are in knowing the regulations, always double check them before you go out, because there's always a chance that you've misremembered or there's been a small change that's been made. And in doing so, your interpretation or what you think to be correct could actually be wrong. So with that, Kelly, would you like to add anything else?
Well, thanks, Brock. I mean, Brock's been very clear. He's owned this from the beginning. We all make mistakes. He did exactly what we encourage people to do when they feel like they may have made a violation or committed a violation. That's contact us directly in that self-reporting. We'll get enforcement involved. Beyond that, there is an ongoing legal proceeding, court proceeding with this, and so we don't want to say too much to anything to interfere with that. And it's very important that complete before we really decide what we're going to do. So I wish we could say more, but it'd just be inappropriate for us to do that. But we will have more information available when it's appropriate.
Thanks, Kelly. I appreciate that. All right, so to get us started, I want to let folks know that we are recording this event and it will be on our YouTube page sometime tomorrow, or you can rewatch it on our Facebook page immediately after the meeting wraps up. Now I'd like to take a moment to introduce my regional management team and the special guests that we have with us tonight. But before I do that, I want to point out that this group of folks that we have on the call with us tonight to help field questions, collectively, they have more than 120 years of experience working for the department. So we have a very broad knowledge base here tonight, and I'm really excited to have them here. I'm really grateful for the regional management team that we do have in Region 2, and they've just been a joy to work with in the 5.5 months that I've been in this position. So let's get started with Chad Jackson.
Good evening, everyone. As Brock said, my name is Chad Jackson. I am the Region 2 Fish Program Manager. Just to give a quick little glimpse of what we do here, the region is divided into 3 districts. We have a senior level district fish biologist stationed in each district. We also have a dedicated warm water fishery biologist. These staff perform a variety of tasks, include surveying populations in our many lakes and rivers, developing hatchery stocking plans, and monitoring our recreational fisheries, in particular our salmon fisheries in the Upper Columbia River. I also have an Endangered Species Act specialist that works on permitting and compliance, and is also heavily involved in the mitigation that's being undertaken by the local public utility districts. And then last but certainly not least is our hardworking hatchery staff who operate the Chelan PUD-owned hatcheries in the area that produce salmon, steelhead, and trout. And with that, I'll kick it over to Matt Monda with the wildlife program. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Matt Monda. I'm the Wildlife Program Manager for North Central Washington. So the Wildlife Program manages and monitors game and T&E species. We take care of our wildlife area, our Department of Fish and Wildlife owned lands, which also include our access areas where we have our boat launches. And we assist farmers and ranchers when they're having conflict with wildlife. And we have private lands biologists that work with farmers and ranchers to enhance habitat and provide hunting access to the public to their private lands. So kind of a diverse program that we have here in Region 2. And I'll kick it over to Mike Jewell.
Good evening. I'm Captain Mike Jewell. I oversee our law enforcement division here in Region 2. And like every other region in the state, our primary focus is protecting our fish and wildlife resources and making sure that folks are safe in the outdoors when they're pursuing whatever interests they may have. So with that, I will kick it over to Carmen Antony.
Hello, I'm Carmen Antony. I run the Habitat program for Region 2, and I have 6 employees that are stationed across our region from Ephrata to Wenatchee to the Okanagan. And our value is in providing technical support to private landowners and local governments when they're considering land use actions and in-water projects that have the potential to impact fish and wildlife resources. So we look forward to hearing from you when you have such projects. And I will kick it over to Albert Ramirez.
Hello, folks. My name is Albert Ramirez, and I am the Region 2 Lands Agent. I work on acquisitions, real estate matters, and permits for the region. I'd like to welcome you and thank you for being here this evening. And I'll kick it over to Kurt.
Thank you, Albert. My name is Kurt Soper. I'm the Executive Director of the Chelan Douglas Land Trust. We're located in Wenatchee, and we are a private, nonprofit conservation organization. We primarily do 3 things. We conserve land, either through acquisition of conservation easements. We care for the land, so we provide stewardship of those lands, and then we connect people to nature and to the outdoors through trails and trailheads and public access. And we partner a lot with the Department of Fish and Wildlife, and a little later on this evening, I'm going to show a few pictures and talk about some of those partnership things going on. And with that, I think we go back to Brock.
Thanks, Kurt. So help to get people kind of situated where the North Central region is. So the state is divided into 6 regions. I think we're going to get a slide here. There we go. And so the North Central region includes Adams, Chelan, Douglas, Grant, and Okanogan counties. Our headquarters is in Ephrata, but we also have other field offices, I think, in Omak, Twist, Winthrop, and Wenatchee. Our Wenatchee district office is the only other place, though, that we provide customer service. It's located on Highway 97A, just a couple miles north of Highway 2 after you make that turn. So although we're close to the public still, which again, we hope to open as soon as we can, still feel free to reach out to our customer service staff. We've got the email address here posted in the chat along with our phone number. Our customer service staff are always there to help. We've also just started 2022 legislative season. And I think Kelly's got some updates for us tonight.
Having a little trouble with my mute button. I'll give you some quick updates here from headquarters, really around our budget and around legislation. As Brock said, our legislative session just started. I'm going to spew, I'll advance in, or apologize in advance. I'm going to spew quite a bit of information at you. If you really need more information, a lot of this is available on our website, or you can also email me and we'll get you an answer to any questions. So the session started January 10th, just a little over a week ago. It's a short session, so we alternate in the state between the long session and the short session. Short session this year, 60 days. It's usually limited to pretty simple things, following up on issues from last year. And it's also a budgetary effort, but really around supplemental budget, which is really fixing holes in the budget, adjustments that weren't foreseen last year. The budget's really set on a 2-year basis. This is kind of the checkpoint, so it's typically a pretty small budget. In keeping with the short session, we ran very little agency-sponsored legislation. This agency request legislation, we have 4 bills, and I'll hit them real quick. Making hunting and fishing more accessible. This is really an amalgamation of a bunch of little ideas to make hunting and fishing more accessible and more clear for our constituents. It's things like aligning youth dates or youth ages for hunting and fishing. Right now, one's at 15, one's at 16. It aligns those. It provides some reduced fees for our active service military who are stationed here so they can buy resident licenses. Also, same for out-of-state college students who are going full-time to college here, they can get resident licenses. It would allow the use of a temporary fishing license for our Lowland Lake opener. That's our biggest event of the year, and we want to make it easy for people to get out there and enjoy it and not have to buy the full annual license. It also creates an incentive for what your first time buying a hunting license after passing the hunter education, you get a $20 discount. So just a whole host of those type of items, pretty low impact to the agency and hopefully good impact to you, the constituents, and make it a little easier to get into the activities that we support. The second one is expanding eligibility for our American Disabilities Act Advisory Committee. So you'll see a few things here that might be odd to have a legislation from an agency. Almost all of our stuff is dictated through statute. And so it really takes legislative action to change those. One of those is our ADA Advisory Committee. It actually specifies what kinds of disabilities you can have to be on the committee. We'd like to open that up to any disability, any ADA recognized disability, you can be on the committee. And we also want to add a couple spots on the committee to allow those that provide services and help and assistance to the disabled folks that are taking advantage of this to be on the committee too. They've got a lot of great ideas. They're actually doing the nuts and bolts of getting folks out there. We want to hear from them on that committee. Excuse me, increasing access to state recreation lands. This is really an effort we do in partnership with parks primarily. Department of Parks runs the Discover Pass, and they have 12 days a year that they can provide you access without a Discover Pass, so free access days. Those are only good on parks lands. So this bill would say, no, actually on those free days, you should be able to go to any state lands, whether they're parks, Fish and Wildlife, or DNR. And DNR and wildlife should have a say in which 12 days are available so that we can try to align them with activities that are really important to our constituent users. So again, so it's improving access to those lands for folks, at least on those 12 days. The last is increasing electronic print from home licenses. Again, this is specified in statute how we can license folks. And this is something we've been wanting to do for a couple of years or a few years. And we are actually a little behind Oregon. I think that's a good thing for us. We use the same vendor, so they're working out a lot of the bugs, so it should be more efficient for us. This would not establish those licenses. It gives us the ability to go out and build rules to allow for a different licensing procedure. We think it's more efficient for us. We think it's a better service for the public. And it actually gives us data potentially in real time so we can do a better job of monitoring what's going on out there. And that's the sum of what we're asking for as far as policy type bills in the legislature. I'll touch a little bit on budget now on the next slide, please. So these, we go in again on a supplemental budget year. It's a smaller budget year for us. We went in pretty heavy this year. And actually with the governor's budget right now, it's going to be a fairly big budget year, at least for discussion purposes. These are a few of the key elements we provided to the legislature in request. This is not all of them. The first is the $2.6 million freshwater monitoring. As we provide fishing around the state in particular, this is really to do effort level estimates, creel surveys, et cetera. We have to make sure that our fishing, even on healthy stocks, isn't impacting non-healthy stocks, either limiting stocks or ESA stocks or unintended stocks. And we have to be able to monitor just how much we're actually catching. This money allows us to do a better job of that, which allows us to make sure we can support the seasons that we're trying to put out there for folks. The next slide is the 2.4 million for wildlife monitoring, including mountain goats. This also includes deer, elk, bighorn sheep, mountain goats, and turkeys. So we do a lot of work, obviously, around these wildlife species. Significant chunk of this money is for radio collars. We've been using collars a lot. A lot of those were purchased on one-time dollars. They're wearing out. They ended their service life. We have to replace those and recapture animals. So this allows us to maintain that. It also has some turkey money in there, where right now our turkey estimates are basically done off a hunter reporting. This would allow us to actually do some actual surveys and some habitat restoration and hopefully do a better job on turkeys as well. The next is Growth Management Act, putting the salmon recovery efforts into that. I think most folks know under the Growth Management Act, municipalities and counties have to do a growth management plan. It has to be updated periodically. Those updates are coming due for a number of those entities, and Department of Fish and Wildlife serves as a technical expert for salmon recovery in those plans. This is really crucial for us to get into those plans. That's that first step, that growth management, that land use planning. If you don't get salmon recovery built into that, you're starting from behind. So really important for us to be able to source that and resource that to provide service to those local entities. The $1 million to the salmon team capacity, similar to the first one, it's getting more and more complex to be able to fish for salmon in the state. And this really builds our internal capacity for all that work we have to do to stay compliant with the Pacific Salmon Treaty, compliant with the Endangered Species Act, and compliant with our agreements with co-managers. So this is really just helping us maintain or increase the capacity for us to do that so we can provide the fishing opportunities that we do. Forage fish spawning. This is a long-term database where we can actually use that information to predict how well our higher trophic level species are doing. We did it for a number of years. It got moved to a different agency in the budget, but still us doing it or in charge of doing it. And it somehow mysteriously got cut. So we're asking to get that money back. It's a really cool opportunity too, in that the Washington Conservation Corps, so the young kids were trying to get into the business. It's a great exposure for them to get out there and do some monitoring and see what it's like to work with and for the Department of Fish and Wildlife. Hatchery production and compliance is really cost of living type of stuff. This is where our cost of permits goes up, where we mark millions of fish every year. It's getting more and more difficult to do that. COVID really put a strain on that. Our staff did an absolutely spectacular job over the last couple of years to get everything done. This is providing some resources to make sure we can do that. And it pays the higher electric bills and the higher permitting bills as well. Supporting, I warned you this would be a blast, so I apologize again. Support safe and sanitary water access sites. We've got a number of wildlife sites, 33, over 500 water access sites across the state. We're seeing increased use of those sites, tremendous growth under COVID. That's a great thing for us, not the COVID, but the use of our lands. That's what we want to see. But with that intense use comes higher management costs. A little more dumping, a little more vandalism. We need signage to keep people in the right place. We need to keep those toilets clean. We want to make sure people can use our land, want to use our land, and they can have a safe and clean experience when they do. The last one is fish passage, and it's really fish passage and screening. We're updating our rules around that. This is another one we need to get ahead of the curve on salmon recovery in particular. And this is just to provide the money to be able to update those rules to make sure we're doing our job to support those efforts so that we can all keep fishing. I think that's about it. Again, this stuff is available on our website, and you can also send an email to director@dfw.wa.gov, and we'll make sure you get an answer if I missed something that you want to know about, or ask a question in the Q&A. I'll kick it back to you, Brock, and get out of the headquarters geek mode.
Thanks, Kelly. Really appreciate that update. So I just want to give a little bit, don't want to take a lot of time here, a really quick kind of highlight overview of the region and some of the work that we've got going on. So, when I think about Region 2 and what makes Region 2 unique and why should they come and seek out opportunities to recreate in our region? We have a diversity of wildlife and habitats in this region, whether it be the sand dunes down by Moses Lake, grasslands, prairies, sagebrush. We've got wetlands. We've got ponderosa pine forests and a diverse set of wildlife that uses those. From a game species perspective, we kind of have the full gamut here, but we've got moose, elk, bighorn, mountain goat, almost any big game opportunity that's in the state we've got in Region 2. We're probably most notable for mule deer, though, and bighorn sheep, our upland bird opportunities and waterfowl hunting. From a non-game perspective, we have a lot of conservation efforts that are taking place in this region, trying to preserve and conserve these very unique species that occur on these landscapes. Some of those include sage and sharp-tailed grouse, pygmy rabbits, western gray squirrels, lynx and wolverines. The work that our district's 6 staff up in Okanogan County, some of the neatest work they've done is with lynx and wolverines. Just really interesting stuff. Throughout the region, we own and manage approximately 340,000 acres spread across 9 wildlife areas. I don't know how many folks know it, but we actually are home to the oldest wildlife area in the state. The first wildlife area purchased was in 1938. That was 83 years ago, and that's the Seussland Wildlife Area for the primary purpose of conserving mule deer winter range. We also have an endless number of lakes, rivers, and streams that provide some of the best fishing opportunities the state has to offer. Again, whether you're looking for salmon or steelhead or a number of freshwater species, trout, we've got ample opportunity in this region. That's a lot of fun. I encourage folks to look into that. Our staff do a tremendous job of providing access to those opportunities. We manage 114 water access sites just here in Region 2. All right, next slide. So one of the questions that I've gotten as a kind of the new regional director is, what are the priorities? What are the issues facing the conservation of wildlife species in Region 2. And one of those that really jumps out is climate change and what comes with that. And in Region 2, when we think about that, we're really focused on drought and wildfires. So that figure, we all remember last summer, this past summer, and the heat dome that occurred. And that figure is really illustrating the challenges that our natural resources are presented. Almost all of Region 2 was in the drought severity index was severe to exceptional. It really was an extreme situation. As a result of kind of these hotter and drier summers, we've also seen a significant increase in the size and frequency of wildfires during the past 20 years across the region. Interestingly, the frequency and size is really more in line with what our historical fire occurrence was before we kind of went into a suppression phase. But what has really changed is the intensity of those fires. We expect the recent patterns and wildfires to persist into the near future. And so we've really got to position ourselves where we're better prepared to respond to those and increase our resiliency. Next slide. So this is just a really neat schematic that was put together. I don't know how familiar folks are with story maps, but they're an ArcGIS based way of telling a very long, sometimes complicated story in a very succinct way, and really relying on images to help tell that story. This one was created by the University of Washington School of Environmental and Forest Services. I've put the link down there that was shared with our agency. I believe the public can still access this, but I can't guarantee that, but I would encourage folks to try it if they're interested. But this shows the number of fires that occurred in the north central region. It's centered around OMAC from 1950 to 2000. Go to the next slide. And this shows the fires that have occurred in the last 21 years. And so you can quickly see there's been a dramatic shift in the fire occurrence on our lands across Region 2. Next slide. So I indicated there's some efforts that are starting to build fire resiliency, and that's not just on our lands. That's really a statewide effort. Department of Natural Resources is really active in this as well. Specific to what we're doing on our department lands, we have numerous forest restoration projects that have been completed over the past 5 to 6 years. We've really increased our capacity within our forest restoration team. We've brought on a number of new staff in recent years to help us complete that work. We have several projects that are planned for the future. When we implement these projects, our primary goals are to reduce fuel loads, reduce fuel ladders, which keeps these fires out of the ground, increase our growing space for dominant trees, increase wildlife forage production, and in areas where they occur, we also hope to reinvigorate our aspen stands. Next slide. So I just want to show you some of the projects that have been completed. This is on the Medhow Wildlife Area. You can see the unthinned portion of this stand on the left part of the photo, and on the right part, what it looks like after it's been thinned. Next slide. This photo comes from the Sinlahican Wildlife Area, and this is illustrating an example where we're trying to thin out an aspen stand and reinvigorate that so those stands can improve in their overall health. Next slide. This photo is really telling to me. When I found this, this is a great story. So this is on the Scotch Creek Pogue Mountain unit. The Pogue Mountain unit of the Scotch Creek Wildlife Area. And the top right photo, so all 3 of these stands were associated with the same fire event. The top photo shows a stand that had not received any treatment. It was those highly dense forested stands. And as you can see, when the fire went through there, it resulted in almost complete stand replacement and removal. The middle picture, the second picture down, that was a stand that had been partially thinned prior to the fire. You can see all the brown trees in that photo. Most of them are likely full mortality and resulting in about half of the stand being replaced. And then the final photo is a stand that had been thinned and a prescribed burn had been implemented prior to the same fire event. And as you can see, fire intensity did not get near as hot. And so that's a healthier forest for us. So that's what we're trying to achieve and hope to achieve in the future on more locations. All right, next slide. So another exciting effort that we're hoping improves our fire resiliency is the Shrub Step Proviso. This was funded by the legislature, and they provided $3.5 million for the 21 to 23 biennium. A portion of that, I think it's about $2.35 million, if I remember correctly, is ongoing. So that funding will be available in future bienniums as well. This is a collaborative effort, really. DFW is spearheading it, but we have a steering committee that includes both the Department of Natural Resources and the State Conservation Committee that are helping to kind of shape and drive this. We also have a number of advisory groups that are being formed that includes tribal, state, federal, local, and private entities. And those advisory groups are broken out into specific groups targeting specific topics to help form this and figure out what are the priorities, what do those need to be. The primary objectives of this proviso are to provide and identify near-term actions. These might be things like, hey, what can we go out with boots on the ground and do right now? We know it needs to be done. It's good work. That could be weed control. It could be seed collection, plantings. A big piece of this to get it off the ground is looking at what are the personnel capacity needs that we have right now to make this successful now and into the future, and looking at that. And then their second objective is, because we have this ongoing funding, and we know that these challenges are not going to go away in the near future, we need to develop a long-term strategy so that we can be successful. Just received an update on this today, and there's been a lot of exciting work already done. And I think the group's really positioning themselves well to be successful. And they're hoping to really roll this out to the public sometime in early February to tell folks, you know, this is what we're hoping to do and accomplish with this money. All right, let's move to the next slide. So one of the species that can really benefit from these efforts are pygmy rabbits. I think a lot of folks, if you're on here, you're familiar with that. An interesting anecdote was I started my career in Ephrata as an assistant district wildlife biologist. And I was on the team of folks that actually went and got our first batch of pygmy rabbits to reintroduce into the region. So that's been a decades-long effort. Our staff that are working on that are doing a great job and have had a lot of successes. Unfortunately, the 2020 Pearl Hill fire was a real challenge and actually set us back a little bit. So we lost 43% of our known population of pygmy rabbits. We lost all shrub steppe habitat in one of our 3 recovery areas. That didn't stop us from continuing our efforts. In 2021, kind of an update, we released 33 rabbits this year, and we actually documented an 80% increase in the overall population in the Beasley Hills from 2020. For the sagebrush flat recovery area, we didn't have any releases this year. We've also just now started our monitoring to assess that population. But good news and exciting news is we've already identified a new subpopulation on private property. One of the new challenges that could be facing pygmy rabbits is rabbit hemorrhagic disease. So hemorrhagic diseases, I think most people will be familiar with them. You know, the ones that affect deer most commonly. We had an outbreak this year with blue tongue and EHD, but there's also this hemorrhagic disease that's occurring in wild populations of rabbits across the West. Thankfully, we haven't detected it in Washington yet, but nonetheless, we need to do what we can to protect pygmy rabbits from that, and at least provide us with some buffer. So our staff this year began efforts to capture and vaccinate as many rabbits as they can against this disease. And they were able to vaccinate close to 100 rabbits this year. Next slide. Another species that really stands to benefit from our fire resiliency efforts are mule deer. As many people know, that the number of fires that have occurred in Region 2 over the past 5 to 6 years, several of those occurred on critical mule deer range. DFW is currently monitoring 4 mule deer populations using radio collars in the state, and 2 of those are in Region 2. One group of deer is in the Medhow Valley that were radio collared as part of our predator prey project. And then we've also got mule deer radio collared in the Wenatchee Foothills. The objectives of this collaring effort are to monitor survival, causes of mortality, movements, and habitat use. That information is going to allow us to be able to identify important habitat use areas and migration corridors. And that's important because protecting winter range and those important use areas for mule deer is important to the conservation of that species, and is actually one of the main functions of many of our wildlife areas in the region. Although we own a significant amount of land in Region 2, this is not a mission that we can be successful just solely on our own and just solely relying on our wildlife areas. And that's where our local partnerships really come into play. And I'm glad to have the Chelan Douglas Land Trust with us tonight, because they're one of the partners that we're really excited to have in achieving our mission. So with that, I would like to hand it over to Kurt so he can kind of give us an overview of some of the work that land trust has been doing.
Great. Thank you, Brock, very much. Hopefully everybody can see the slide there. We are in the Wenatchee Foothills here, and I'm going to highlight a few areas where we're working with the department. And let's see here. I'm going to move up a little bit. So the foothills, if you folks are familiar with the Wenatchee, you know that the Columbia River runs through it, and you've got kind of the population center located along the river in Wenatchee and East Wenatchee, but over up above the cities are the green foothills, which are well known to local residents, and much of it is open year round to for people to get out and enjoy and hike. But there is a section in the north end, and I'm not seeing that picture, but I'll keep going down and see what we can find. Where that is closed, that kind of the northern half, the north of 5th Street, if you will, every year closes the 1st of December for the wintering mule deer. And that works really well. People recognize that, understand it, respect it, and it's critical to the deer. And we kind of get the support from the department on when to do that and how to do it. And but the southern half of the foothills, which are not heavily used by the mule deer, are open year round, and people do enjoy that in the middle of winter. Kind of a lot of snow out there right now, but people do get out there and enjoy it. A couple areas where others areas we're working. This is a picture of the Cashmere Canyons Preserve, which is a brand new preserve that the Land Trust has a conservation easement on. So it's privately owned, but it is open to the public, and there's 10 to 12 miles of new trails on the preserve. And this is a great example where what the department did was recognize, again, this is important for mule deer habitat and a lot of other wildlife species. And they really supported us when we applied for funding from the state to help acquire this conservation easement and develop the trailhead. And thanks to their support, we got that funding from the state and have a trailhead in place. This is up Naham Canyon Road, about 3 miles off of Highway 2, but just is just like a little image there that shows where the trailhead is and the 10 to 12 miles of trails that are open. Just opened last May. Really encourage folks to get out there, especially in the spring, next spring. Wildflowers are incredible out there. Heading further up into the mountains, the White River Preserve is another area we've partnered with the department. This has largely been all around salmon habitat, and there's been quite a bit of land acquisition, smaller parcels up here, really focused on protecting high quality salmon habitat that's already in place, but also some restoration work as well. So just kind of looking at the lay of the land, you can sort of see where Lake Wenatchee is, and you see the parcels of land there. The green are owned and managed by the Land Trust, the yellow by the Department of Fish and Wildlife. So we work hand in glove there in the management of these properties, and I've done a little bit of restoration, but the White River is one of the rivers where the habitat is in pretty good shape compared to some of the other streams and rivers that we have in the region. And just going up to the upper White River, same story there, a mix of Land Trust and department lands. This is open in the winter. In fact, I went out and snowshoed on the White River Preserve over the holiday season with my kids. It was a great experience, but there's a lot more snow than there is in this picture this year. So got a big, heavy snowfall, as everybody knows, in our region. But it's a great place to visit. And if you're into winter recreation and snowshoeing, this is a good one. You could go to our website to get directions on how to get there. I'm going to go over to Douglas County and the Spivey Butte Preserve. This is what it looked like before the Pearl Hill fire in the fall. And this one is owned and managed by the Land Trust. It's 1,400 acres. And it burned entirely in that Pearl Hill fire. And so we're one of the entities that's working with the on the Shrub step proviso that Brock was explaining. And we've already done some sort of early actions, some planting of big sage, which was pretty much completely removed from the site and doesn't resprout after fire, and growing some more that we'll plant out again this year. And knowing that it's going to be, you know, decades before we can get that sagebrush back, but we're off to a great start. And one of the critters that we hope will respond to that are these magnificent birds. This is a sage grouse in full regalia in the spring when the males are dancing. And you know, this is a bird that if we want to continue to have it in the state of Washington, we really got to get it done in Douglas County. It's really the kind of the last stand. So Region 2 is really important for this bird and a lot of the other species that are associated with native shrub steppe habitat that Brock was talking about. So that's a quick summary, a quick run through of some of the projects we're proud to work with the department on. And I'm tossing it back to Brock, I think.
Yep, Brock just has to get himself unmuted. All right, so now we're gonna move into our Q&A section of the evening. I think I put us a few minutes behind with my blabbering and my presentation. So we'll be sure to add a few minutes at the end here so that we have as much time as we had originally planned to receive Q&A. So as a reminder, at any time, type in your question or comment in the Q&A feature on your screen. Please keep your question brief, respectful, and submit one at a time so we can allow many people to participate. If you are participating by phone, you can raise your hand by dialing *9. To unmute yourself when it's your turn, dial *6. Again, *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. We'll answer as many questions as we can. If we run out of time and don't get to your question, please email us at director@dfw.wa.gov so we can follow up with you. And I think that email address will get posted in the chat as well. All right, so with that, we'll start with our first question. And it's, when can we expect a comprehensive plan to address the predator issue in Washington, especially with elk and deer populations in decline? So I think I'll field that first question. So the game division within the department has predator prey guidelines that clearly identify the criteria that we use to kind of determine when and where we would consider predator management actions. There have been efforts that are occurring in other places across the state, not in Region 2. Currently in Region 2, we don't have any ungulate population that meets the criteria of an at-risk ungulate population, which is what it takes for us to consider predator management actions. The two kind of locations I'm talking about where we do have ongoing efforts are, we had the predator prey study that was occurring in the northeast part of the state and also in the Medhow Valley, part of Region 2. And so that's exciting work that I think is wrapping up this year. This is their last season. I think they're wrapping up in the coming months, and we hope to see the results of that work come out, you know, within the next year or so. The other place where we have considered predator management actions, or at least we're evaluating that, is in the Blue Mountains for the Blue Mountains elk herd. So that population met the criteria. Prior to this job, I was the ungulate section manager for the state, and that was kind of one of the last things we got up and going before I left. That population had seen very suppressed calf survival. And so in response to that, last spring, we radio collared 125 calves to try to get an idea of what were the primary factors that were limiting calf survival. I know that that's been reported a little bit in the media. But those places where we are following the guidelines that were outlined in the game management plan, we are being responsive and looking into considering at least predator management action where it's appropriate. Okay, Kelly, I think this next question will be good for you. Are there any plans to give veterans a discount on license and tag fees?
So I would say not directly, not at this time. I mentioned a little bit in our agency request legislation that we are looking to provide active service person stationed in the state a break on resident rates. We also have a non-resident and disabled veteran break right now, but I don't know of any discounts for veterans straight up. If I'm wrong, we'll try to phone a friend here before the evening's out to correct me, but we don't have any, it's not in our current agency request legislation. I kind of like the idea, so this is a value of getting out here and hearing from you directly.
Thanks, Kelly. All right, Chad Jackson. Has the department planted any fish at Rocky Ford to replenish the creek after the pelican issue last year?
The answer to that is yes. We don't personally stock Rocky Ford Creek. We have an arrangement with Trout Lodge, who has 2 hatcheries on site, and they plant their own fish into that lake, and they trickle them in through the year, with maybe the exception of the summer, but usually the big plant happens in the late fall, winter. And we just, there's been some recent plants for some fish that are 2 pounds each and some that are 6 pounds each. So there are fish out there for anglers to catch.
Thanks, Chad. All right, Matt Monda. Question number 4, could there be a bulls only elk season in more game management units in Chelan and West Okanagan counties?
It's a good question. It's been around for lots of years. Region 2, we kind of are part of 2 elk herds. One of them is the Selkirk, and one of them is on the fringe of the Clockham. So the majority of Region 2 isn't really covered by any elk management plan. What would be required would be those areas would be expanded into an existing plan if that was a good idea. In some ways it is, but the history of where we have elk hunting and where we're more liberal in our harvest has a real tie to damage. If you think about the Chelan and Western Okanagan counties, most of the lower elevation, which would be wintering habitat, is in private ownership, and a lot of it's in orchards. So orchards and elk don't get along very well. We have plenty of higher elevation habitat where the elk would be fine during summer and other parts of the year, but we really have a real narrow band of wintering habitat that, we try to protect as best as we can. And, their partnership with Chelan Douglas Land Trust really kind of focuses on that band of habitat that's really important. So part of our assessment would we have to look to see if we really have the capacity to have elk on that landscape, particularly during the winter, without causing a lot of trouble for the private landowner and the damage that they would consider. We did, I'm not quite sure how many years ago, probably 5 to 10 years ago, did expand the Selkirk elk herd plan into Eastern Okanagan County to grow elk numbers in there. Part of that was a request from the Colville tribe, which has hunting rights in the north half, so they were interested in having more elk in there. And as we've done that, we have experienced more elk damage. So we'd have to progress with an idea like that really cautiously, so we wouldn't cause an unmanageable amount of problems on the private landscape.
Thanks, Matt. Really appreciate that response. All right, let's see. I think this one might be good for Kelly. So why don't more commissioners have a hunting or fishing license? Only 2 out of the 9 have ever held a license, but they make important decisions on hunting and fishing policies. So I don't know that you can speak to who currently or has held fishing or hunting licenses, Kelly, but maybe you can tell us a little bit about how the selection process goes, for assigning people to the commission or appointing them.
Sure. And I do know of at least a couple that do. The couple that do, I don't know, I wouldn't say definitively on the rest. We only have 7 commissioners right now. We have 2 vacancies. Commissioners are appointed through the Senate. I think it's important. This is a good opportunity really to plug what we do. And that provides, we manage the fish and wildlife in trust for all citizens of the state. That's everybody in the state, whether you hunt or fish or not. Certainly we have a strong support from our hunting and angling community, but we really need to manage fish and wildlife for everybody. We need to do it on an ecosystem basis. What's good for fish and wildlife is good for hunters and fishers, but hunters and anglers, but it's really important that we manage those as a whole. including those folks who just want to go out and wildlife watch, outdoor recreationists, and those people who don't even know how much they get a better quality of life because of the fish and wildlife in the state. The commission provides a guidance and oversight, policy oversight for our agency. And so I think it would be terrible if we didn't have anybody that does. I would welcome hunters and anglers in our the governor's filling the next 2 vacancies, but I don't think it's crucial. And I think, folks, if you look at some of the records of the votes of our commissions, some of our non-hunting and angling commissioners are strongest advocates for hunting and angling. And so it really depends on the individual, not whether or not they are currently participating in the activity. That said, I will welcome getting a couple more commissioners. We really need a full suite to make this thing function properly.
Thanks, Kelly. All right, we're going to go back to Matt Monda. And Matt, this is from Lloyd Peterson. And Desert Unit 290 was a prime waterfowl hunting area that now seems to have been converted to mule deer habitat. Why isn't it being managed for waterfowl and waterfowl hunting opportunities?
Let me provide some clarification so we're kind of on the same page. So GMU 290 is a game management unit. So game management units we define to manage largely big game populations, turkeys also. So we really don't manage waterfowl on a GMU basis. Lloyd's right, the desert unit is a prime deer hunting area. It's probably the most coveted permit area we have for mule deer hunting. Our management for mule deer on that area really is mostly aerial surveys and monitoring harvest and adjusting permit levels associated with it. You know, our habitat management in that area is really fire suppression and restoration after that. So that's pretty much how we manage that area for deer, right? But the trick part of this question, within that desert unit, there's a wildlife area, the Columbia Basin Wildlife Area, and that's the desert unit of the Columbia Basin Wildlife Area. So, and we do manage the Columbia Basin for waterfowl hunting and waterfowl habitat. Actually, we spend a lot of money for waterfowl and waterfowl hunting opportunities there. We have quality waterfowl areas where we have limited number of people that can access the area any day that it's open. We spend a lot of money on waterfowl habitat restoration, vegetation control, vegetation management. I like this question because it really gives me an opportunity to describe some of the nuances of the Columbia Basin. Columbia Basin is a desert. You know, there's areas where we only have 5 inches of rainfall per year, but it's highly affected by the irrigation project that provides wasteway and lakes and ponds all over the place. So that hydrology provides opportunities in the desert for agriculture and also for wetlands. And those things change all the time. You know, you put water in the desert, it's not a natural system. You know, the hydrology is backwards. Normally around here, it snows and rains this time of year and melts and goes into the wetlands. What happens in the irrigation project, the water comes in during the summer when there's when it's normally no precipitation. So the hydrology is messed up. The wetlands are managed. It makes managing the wetlands very difficult. So the deserts always changes. And 30 years ago, there were very few deer on that area. Over time, the deer have developed because the habitat's changed. We aren't really managing the habitat. The water and the vegetation are there, providing good forage for the deer, and we're carefully managing the deer to make sure it's a quality opportunity. Somewhat ironically, 30 years ago, there were more waterfowl using the basin. The numbers of mallards using the Columbia Basin were a lot higher than they are now. It was really easy to get your limit of ducks. Well, except 30 years ago, the bag limit for mallards was only 3. And that's predominantly the primary waterfowl hunting species here. So the reason the bag limit was so low, I think there was a bag limit of 4 birds in your bag and only 3 of them were mallards, was because the flyway population was really low. but the number of birds that were wintering in Washington, mallards, was much higher. So things have changed. So now you can shoot 7 mallards a day because the population in the flyway is very high. But the problem is the birds aren't using the basin like they used to, aren't using Washington as they used to. The number of mallards that are wintering in Washington are declining. In the Columbia Basin, it's largely related to food availability during the winter. Right now, we're snow covered, and the birds have very limited ability for foraging the fields. But the agriculture has become very efficient in their corn harvest, and that's the main food of mallards here in the basin. And it's so efficient that there's very little waste grain when they harvest at a cornfield. So the end result is we are not holding as many mallards as we historically had in the basin, and the waterfowl hunting isn't quite as good as it used to be. Still lots of birds. Still, you have to work for them, but we don't hold the large. At one time, we held the majority of the mallards in the Pacific Flyway in Washington, and unfortunately, it's not the case anymore.
Thanks, Matt. That was a really thorough response. So this next question, I think we'll kick to you, Kelly. So why was the spring bear hunt canceled, and how can we get it back?
Thanks, Brock. So I will explain exactly where we are with spring bear. I'll use words carefully because there's some nuances here, and I think it would just irritate folks if I get into the nuances too much. So our spring bear are a special hunt, just like our moose, sheep, goat, or quality elks, things like that. They're issued on an annual basis. So each year we establish the hunt numbers and locations for that year. We make a proposal as an agency to the commission, and we needed an affirmative pass of that proposal to have the season. So this year we went to the commission with the proposal, and the vote was split 4-4. At that point, we're down 1 commissioner. I mentioned before we're down 2 now. So with an even number of commissioners, one of the challenges is you can come up with an even vote, and it was just that 4-4. And so we did not have the affirmative vote to have a 22 season. Folks ask me a lot, so I'll go into a little depth here, complaining that on a split vote, why isn't it status quo? Which is a good question, and the answer is it is. So each year we establish the season for 1 year. Right now, before the vote, the season was established for 21. The current regulation is for 2021 spring bear season. The vote didn't pass. It was a 4-4 tie. Status quo is we have a 2021 bear season on the books. We don't have a 2022 season on the books. So that's why we did not schedule a season. People are calling it a cancellation. That's where the nuances come in. Is it a cancellation or a failure to have a new hunt? It's really technically the failure to have the new hunt or decision not to have the new hunt. What you can do about it is talk to your commissioners. The commissions are in the position to make this choice. We've had 6 petitions since the decision, or the split decision, the non-decision, to have a spring bear season. Those 6 different petitions are nuanced as well, but in general, they are bring back a spring bear season, either in 2022 forward or just just forward, depending on how the petitions are written. We have an obligation to respond to those petitions by either denying them or starting rulemaking to have a season. Those decisions are in front of the commission for this Friday at 1 o'clock. So all 6 petitions I'll use the term reinstate the spring bear season, will be made this Friday by the commission at beginning at 1 o'clock, ends at 2:30. So that's how we arrived where we are on spring bear, and that's the path forward. If you want to have a spring bear, let your legislature's wrong venue. Let your commissioners know that you'd like to see them accept one of those petitions to do rulemaking. And same as if you don't support it, let them know that too. They're faced with that tough decision day after tomorrow.
Thanks, Kelly. All right, so this next question is, please explain Hydatid disease. What safety concerns does it have on humans who consume ungulates that are infected? So I am loosely familiar with this. All I really know is that it's associated with a tapeworm, I can't really speak to it beyond that. Does anybody on here tonight have a more of an understanding than that? Okay, I see heads nodding no. So what I will request is that whoever posted this question, please go ahead and email it to the director at dfw.wa.gov email address. And I will make sure to reach out to our agency veterinarian and definitely get that response. Sorry, I didn't know more about that topic. Question 9 is, do predators and scavengers indirectly spread CWD if they eat infected carrion? And my short answer to that is yes, I know they can, but I can't really speak to, to what extent or degree they do that and what the risk is. But I do know they can consume an infected deer, and then those prions can be deposited through their feces. Let's see. All right, Matt, I'm gonna kick this one to you. The Big Bend area is landlocked by private lands. What is being done to address open access?
It was a little long-winded last time. I'll be shorter this time because I don't really know the parcel you're talking about. It's a pretty big wildlife area and there's some pretty rugged access, and it requires a lot of hiking to get in. But you contact here at us here at the Region 2 office and give us a little bit more detailed of exactly where you're talking about. I could probably address your question a little better.
Thanks, Matt. All right, next question. Where does the department I'm going to rephrase this. Where does the department distribute PR Pittman Robertson funds? And so what I can say is that those funds are used for the game division, our diversity division, funding those projects. It helps fund our district wildlife biologists. It helps fund our habitat program. So there's a private lands, wildlife areas. So those funds go to a lot of different, programs and divisions in our agency. Is there anything you would add to that, Kelly?
No, I think you hit it pretty well, Brock. I mean, for the folks that don't know, that's an excise tax on firearms and ammunition, and it comes to the agency through a federal process. And it's got strings on it to make sure it's supporting those species. And we use it for all the things that Brock said. I think that's a solid answer.
And I see, Matt, you got your hand up. You want to add to that?
Yeah, just hunter education. We use it to fund hunter education and enforcement also. So it's used, hunter education it's an important funding source for it.
Okay, Chad Jackson. Why are east side lakes and ponds, especially in the southeast, only stocked in the early parts of the year?
Might need a little clarification from this individual, and please reach out to this person and get them in touch with me. But just real quick, in general, it's a combination of when the fish are ready in the hatchery to be planted and the right time of year to plant them. So it depends upon which size we're talking, but if we're talking catchables, usually takes about a year to grow those, and they're ready in the springtime to be planted when people want to go fishing. It's also when the lakes are cool and when the natural food resources are available for those fish to eat. That doesn't quite answer that question. Like I said, perhaps get that person in touch with the team of Freda account, and I can address that question further.
Yeah, and as I read the question again, I think they're referencing the southeast part of the state. And so if that's the case, I would encourage this person to actually contact the Region 1 office, because that's who covers that region of the state. Okay, Matt, we're going to come back to you again. Migratory mule deer in Chelan County and parts of Okanogan County are really struggling, and the heavy snow this winter will adversely affect survival. What will it take for the department to move from the general 3-point minimum general mule deer season to a special permit season?
That's a long question. So let's start out with, I don't think it'd be really accurate to say that the deer herds are really doing poorly. There's been times when we've had more deer than we have on the landscape now than we do now. We just completed our annual aerial surveys all over north central Washington, and data still has to be analyzed, but it looks like we're in our herd objective. So there's not really a strong indication that our herd here are doing poorly. This winter, the winter came hard, but it came late. The deer always struggle through winter to some degree. So, how they're going to persist through this winter and how they're going to deal with it really depends on what comes down the road. It really hasn't been a long winter with a lot of snow. There's intense, particularly in parts of Chelan County, intense conditions for a lot of deer right now, but they've kind of evolved to deal with that. So we'll have to wait and see if it persists for a while and we get some more rough weather. We could look at some population impacts. Right now, it's too early to tell. The southern slopes of a lot of our foothills are melting with the sun. We had 40 degrees in Wenatchee a few days ago. So I think things are looking more positive. How do we get from a 3-point season to a limited entry permit only season? That's a big cultural change for the public. That's a public question. It really isn't a population question. Is that how we want to create recreation for deer hunting in this state? We can do that lots of different ways. Permit only is a tool we use. We use it on the GMU 290, the desert unit that we talked about earlier. That is a limited entry quality hunting area, but it provides relatively little amount of hunting opportunity because we're limiting the number of people that hunt there. So it's kind of a public trade-off. So whatever we do there, it would be a decision that would have to have a lot of public interaction, and there have to be strong advocacy for that kind of change for the public, because there's a cost and benefits for what we do, and fewer people and higher quality of animals might mean lower opportunities for the average person. So we'd have to weigh that kind of decision very carefully and make sure we get a lot of good public input for us to make the right decision with that.
Thanks, Matt.
So Brock, I'm just going to add a little bit. Matt covered it really well. If you go to our website, there's a pretty good page on how hunting seasons are set. And you'll see there that there's a 3-year process. And really, this is the kind of change we typically would take on in a 3-year package. And so plug it into the web and then join the fun when we do our 3-year packages and submit your ideas. And we thoroughly evaluate and respond to all those requests.
Good reminder, Kelly. Thank you. All right, Chad Jackson. This year, thanks largely to restoration efforts by Yakima Nation Fisheries, we had robust coho runs in both the Wenatchee and Methow rivers, but neither was open to coho angling. What will it take to establish coho seasons in the Wenatchee and Methow rivers in future years when returns are good?
So it's an issue of we don't have ESA coverage for listed steelhead to have standalone coho seasons. We are permitted when other seasons are open, say the later part of summer Chinook or fall Chinook, or when we're able to have a steelhead season, we can allow for the retention of coho, but not standalone. And so what it will take is revising our ESA permits, which we do have one into NOAA that does allow us to open coho seasons, but that hasn't been approved yet. And when it is, we'll be able to offer those opportunities.
Thanks, Chad. All right, so I see that we're at 7:10 right now. So we're probably going to take a couple more questions here before we wrap it up. So let's go to this next one. And this is for you again, Chad. There's been some talk in the Lake Chelan Valley about reintroduction of bull trout into the Stehekin River. Is this true? If it is true, why? Since we have established natural spawning of kokanee and landlocked Chinook salmon in the Stehekin along with other species.
So the answer to that question is yes, it is true. But these discussions are very preliminary with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the National Park Service and us and some others. And the reason for it is restoring the distribution of bull trout where they've been extirpated as part of the overall recovery plan for the Upper Columbia River. Like I said, those talks are early. They are independent of the other fish populations in there, the kokanee, the landlocked Chinook, others, and there's honestly quite a bit of challenges before we get to anything implementable. So I think we are a long ways down the road before serious actions are taken.
All right, I think we're going to wrap up with this last question and we'll kick it to Matt Monda. I'm moving to Region 2 and I'm curious about the resources available for non-consumptive users by the department for people to use to explore the wildlife in the area.
Well, welcome to Region 2. It's a great place. We have the region with the least number of people, the smallest population for any of the regions in the whole state. We don't have any big cities other than Wenatchee. So you're going to be really surprised at the quality of the recreation you'll be able to experience and the lack of crowding. I would think the first place to look would be on our website for the internet anyway. And there's along the top band on buttons to choose, there's a places to go button. And if you check that and you go through and look at our lands and our wildlife areas, you'll kind of see where we have lands and where we have opportunities. There's a tremendous amount of non-consumptive recreational opportunities on our grounds, from water access during the summer when it's hot to any time of the year for hiking and recreation. Lots of it's a lot of it to be self-managed. There's not a lot of like controlled trails to direct people towards and things like that. A lot of it's you're going to explore the area on your own and figure out what opportunities that are there. But I would start with the website, see where you're going to live in the areas that are close, and don't hesitate to call our office here at the Region 2 office in Ephrata and have further conversation. Each of our wildlife areas has a manager that'd be happy to talk to you about what opportunities they would have there.
That person needs to stop by the Land Trust office on Main Street and on Wenatchee Avenue too. We'd be happy to give you some tips.
Thanks, Kurt. Thanks, Matt. And as Matt said, kind of wrap us up. If you have any more questions, don't hesitate to reach out to customer service staff as a follow-up anytime throughout the year. If we didn't get to your question tonight, make sure you get it sent to the director at dfw.wa.gov. Kelly, do you have any closing thoughts?
Thanks, Brock. I think you hit the key ones there. We did not get to all the questions, obviously. I think it's an unfortunate but a great thing because there's a lot of interest, and so it means we need to get back out here and do this again and probably allow more time for questions. Make sure we have your contact information or resend it, as Brock said, and we'll make sure you get answers. Other than that, I sure appreciate everybody taking time out of your busy schedules to join us here tonight. I hope these forums are productive for you. If you have ideas how to make them more productive, this really is a genuine effort on our part to get out here and connect with you. If you've got ideas on other ways to do it or better ways to conduct this particular effort, let us know. We're interested in making sure we make that contact. And with that, I'll sign off and thank everybody for being here. Thanks to the staff, and again, pretty excited to have the regional management team here. These folks that are answering your questions tonight, they're the ones doing the work here in your region, and it's good for you to get introduced to them and then continue a relationship there with your questions.
Thanks, everyone.
That's all.